Hi, my name is Alex Levin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Regal, and I'm here with Simon Lejeune, the VP of Growth at Wealthsimple. Simon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex.
So, to start, you've obviously found a seat on the rocket ship. So tell us maybe a little bit about your background and, what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. So, I work at Wealthsimple currently, the largest fintech in Canada. I'm actually from Belgium. I grew up in Belgium, and then I moved to Canada about 10 years ago and started to work for tech companies on the growth side for a couple of travel tech companies. Number one was BuzzBud, largest intercity bus travel website, where I learned about a lot about SEO and marketing automation, dealing with a really large inventory of products, so like any place A to place B around the world. You can imagine the combinations and the amount of keywords you want to cover. And then from there, from Montreal, I noticed another rocket ship that was taking off and immediately wanted my ticket on board. And that company was Hopper, the travel, flights and hotels and car
Yeah.
rental booking app. And at the time, it was a big bet from that company. They were, at the time, really, people didn't think like normal, like travelers would buy a flight on a phone, right? Like it seemed crazy that you would spend more than $1,000 on a phone. It was still very early days. And then we took the counterpoint of Booking and Expedia, where SEO, Google Ads machines, and went down the mobile path. And that business grew from a couple hundred million in valuation to 5 billion plus today, doing really well. Did a great B2B pivot, and now a lot of with AI assistance actually, and actually AI agents like that can rebook you onto your next flight. A whole other conversation that's super interesting. And then COVID hit. Being at the travel business was
Travel was
probably
not the category
no,
to be in at
exactly.
that time. Yeah.
And you know what? It was really funny because or not funny, I should say, but interesting, let's call it. But right before COVID hit and COVID was announced, everyone was trying to catch flights, right? Like to go home or
Mhm.
to go somewhere. And it was crazy busy. Like we did the highest sales days after COVID was kind of starting to become a big deal. And then right after that, no one was on planes. So flights had to like be crazy discounted. And we had one of the best price alerts feature in the country where we would send millions of notifications because prices were rock bottom and still had like a good amount of teenagers and like young
Yeah,
people
that we're
traveling
going around.
to Miami. So we did
That's
did
funny.
sell
I
good amount of
remember that.
tickets.
So I was just saying I'm French originally. I was actually in France in February of 2020, right as people were
Hmm.
starting to bump elbows and it wasn't quite clear. And that's when he started getting those text messages from random friends going, "I have a friend at the White House and they're telling me they're about." No, they were all fake, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But people freaked out to your point and like immediately booked flights and got out of
Hmm.
Dodge.
But then it was like, the CEO there, Fred, amazing guy. And he had a good analogy where imagine you're like Best Buy,
Mhm.
and on the same day, you have people who bought things from you for the past year that are trying to bring it back for return. Like it was crazy because everyone had their flights canceled. The 3, 4, 5, 6 months away flights were canceled, and people were trying to get flight credits, etc. It was a huge mess. Still really fun because we had to pivot. I don't know how many times and try to figure it out. Get super scrappy with budget, and but eventually I saw also like a lot of other industries popping up, and I decided to start my own thing, a little growth agency, Myland Growth, named after a neighborhood in Montreal where we were based. And then we took Wealthsimple as a client, so my current employer, which was at the time launching, going from what Wealthfront is in the US or robo advisor,
Mhm.
but seeing like all the success that self-directed trading platforms started to have and $0 commission platforms started to have in the US, and launched their Wealthsimple Trades app. And they switched from a kind of a brand play because the robo advisors, the portfolios, I'm asking you to move your retirement assets to me. It's a big ask, right? Like you don't do that after looking at like seeing a TikTok ad. But for a trading app, you can download it at $0 commission, drop $500, instant deposits, and you can buy a stock right away. That was a
Yeah.
perfect fit for performance marketing and mobile growth marketing, which was my specialty at Hopper. So I could bring that over to Wealthsimple, and they're like, "Oh, that's what we need to do." And eventually, acqui-hired our little group to become their growth team, and that's about 5 years ago now. So
So when you
now on that
started,
rocket ship.
what were assets under management then? And like, I know now you guys have just hit a new milestone.
Yeah, we were at around probably 5 billion in assets, mostly in managed investing in portfolios. And we just announced that we hit an amazing milestone of $100 billion in assets, with half of that coming through in the past year. So
Yeah,
it's
the
kind of
craziest part. You guys have just like
exactly.
accelerated. So what changed in the last year? What's led to, all this growth?
Yeah, it's like it's a few things that are compounding. Like when you see exponential growth, usually it's not just one thing, but it's like three different trends that stack on top of each other. And I think like in the financial space, trust is paramount, right? Like you're literally holding your clients' money, especially in Canada. In the US, I think people are a little they love the risk. In Canada, it's a little more risk averse, more thoughtful
Yeah.
sometimes. But so we're seeing the compound impact of just being in the market for so long and building an amazing brand that people love and feel connected to. So you have that organic growth. On top of that, we're adding like product development growth. We added a cash account, which is the best checking and saving account in Canada. We added an amazing credit card which had the longest wait list, which is creating a bit of an issue for us because there's too much demand on
Yeah.
top of the existing investing business. So you have that growth. And then the last thing that has been clicking for the past 2 years has been on the growth side, where we sort of shifted from being super hyper focused on growing the number of clients using Wealthsimple and started to focus on like talking to these clients and try to get them to move their assets over to Wealthsimple. And we
Mm.
unlocked a lot of growth through incentive campaigns and promotions. I like to tell my team and the board or leadership team of Wealthsimple, like what I like the most is giving my clients money. And
Yeah.
instead of paying Google and Facebook to convince someone to move over to Wealthsimple, I can pay you directly, give you a little incentive and carrot. Doesn't work all the time or for every business, but because our brand and product are so sticky, and usually we have great product market fit, people want to make the move, but there's so much friction because you have to call your advisor, like maybe it's a friend of the family, you have to fill out a form. Adding that like reason or the why now you should move with these offers has been very successful, and customers seem to love us for these offers.
Yeah. And I love the point that you made that so much of the success is due to, or some of the success is due to building trust with the customer and actually talking with your customer. So it's not what you always hear. So I remember when I joined a company called Angie, which is the largest home services company in the world, our first thought was digitize everything. It's like Amazon, like, you can just do it on the internet. And I think that trend of like making sure self-serve available is a very important one and is something
Mm-hmm.
customers value. But we realized actually pretty quickly that in the home services industry, perhaps similar to you guys, somebody's home is one of their biggest assets and they care
Mm-hmm.
deeply about what they're going to do to that home. And so they want to actually talk with their home services provider. And so, any effort that we made to hide the phone number and not talk to the customer was actually detrimental to our growth efforts. Yeah, sure, it saved us some money in the short run, but it
Mm-hmm.
massively hurt our customer lifetime value. And so we ended up building big contact centers. This was pre AI, and one of the things we struggled with the most was I was on the growth side also was just like it was the cost was very difficult because it was a human cost, and
Mm-hmm.
the operations are very difficult because when I want to send an email or do an ad, no problem. I can just like immediately do whatever I want. If I wanted the contact center to do something, that was a 2 month project. And even then, maybe they couldn't do it. And they were, always, at least in our world, we were constantly understaffed because we were growing so fast. So it was hard to steal agents from that to go do growth and marketing initiatives. So actually, when we started Regal, I'd say two insights at the beginning. One was how important voice was because we'd had this experience in home services of customers really loved voice. If they could self serve, they were going to go do it. By the time they're calling you, there was a reason they were calling you. Like they wanted to talk with you. And then the other one was that actually the contact center could be a revenue generator, not just a cost center. And
Mm-hmm.
shifting that perspective internally led to a lot of like really interesting tests and new things we were doing. So anyway, maybe, to what we were talking about before the call, you guys have really, I think, leaned in on lots of innovative sales and marketing
Mm-hmm.
strategies. How have you started using talking with a customer to help you guys grow?
Yeah. So the client is very important to us, obviously, and every business is like, the client, the client, the client. Our number one value at the business, and it's very clear, is literally the client, the client, the client. And we're trying to be
Mhm.
as client as obsessed as possible in maybe in the Amazon culture has been around that, like, how do you make it cheaper? How do you make it faster?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you constantly listen to the customer? And Mike Hatchner, our CEO, like really embodies that value. And to give you an example, like the first, I don't know, maybe first 1,000 clients to Wealthsimple, he was personally calling every client to welcome them to Wealthsimple. I was onboarded as a client to Wealthsimple because I saw Mike doing, he had this little briefcase and was doing all the lunch and learns. He had, I don't know, like probably top clients of Uber Eats in Toronto and Montreal
Mm-hmm.
that year. But eventually you scale to millions of customers, and that's not sustainable. And I'm going to tell you and explain to you how we got back into it. It started with these offers we were making to customers, and we're asking like a few questions before they participate in one of the promotions. And usually one of the question is, how much money would you like to bring over to Wealthsimple so we can provide the right level of support for your transfers. Account transfers are super complicated. Sometimes they fail. So if you have like 6 accounts, we might just get on a call and help you, fill out the paperwork, make sure you don't miss anything. So we make sure those account transfers go smoothly. And so because those transfers were fairly large, like we would pick, okay, anyone who wants to move over 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever based on the campaign, we're going to go on a call and see if we can make a difference by being on a call. And it's a bit unusual because in B2B, it makes a lot of sense to have a sales team, BDRs, whatever, SDRs, all the nomenclature. But in B2C, not really, unless you can select potentially the largest clients where it does make sense from a return on investment perspective to call a bunch of them and trying to help them and assist them with their transfers. And so that's when we started to hire a few more people. We call them BDRs, business development reps. Usually they're coming from our CS org. So it's awesome to see the best, customer support people turn into, find like a new career into sales because of that role. So that was awesome. And then seeing like, it makes enough of a difference that you can justify scaling it. But then we still had the challenge of like, what if like I'm just starting with investing and I have a $10,000 account and lead qualification, etc. We can't really justify the cost of calling everyone who is starting with investing, but sometimes they need it the most, right? Like because they do have a lot of questions. Do you support this account type? They also don't really trust. Like is there a phone number that I can call? And so that's like the transfer use case, which is very transactional. But there's also a ton of other use cases. And the number one being just onboarding with Wealthsimple. Hey, I'm signing
Mm-hmm.
up. Here's my info. I want to try this, and we get thousands of those every day. And so that's how we started to look into the AI use case to, being able to serve those customers as well as possible, and started
Yeah.
to explore a few tools, and then eventually started to work together with you guys. I will say like my favorite tool, when you said like being customer obsessed or talking to your clients, a lot of people ask me like, hey, what's your favorite like martech tool? I always say the same answer. It's Typeform. It's a beautiful piece of software, works super well. Do you know Typeform, the
Yeah.
whole survey? But it's so easy to just, I always tell my team when we're in a call, we're debating, do clients prefer this or that? I'm like, I don't know. And why are we spending an hour now? Open Typeform, type the question, open Braze, select 10,000 clients, put the
Yeah.
message, please let us know whatever your feedback, put the link in there. 20 minutes later, literally on the same call, we can have an answer that's like actually informed by our client. So that's to
Yeah.
tell you how much we love getting clients' feedback.
Yeah, for sure. So, to your point, one of the things I love about consumer businesses, which we are not, we're obviously B2B, but one of the fun parts about consumer businesses is, when you're at scale, it's so fast to get that feedback, both
Mm-hmm.
because it's not the end of the world if any one customer doesn't buy, and because, you have enough volume that you can get to statistical significance pretty quickly. And so that was always, one of the fun parts of being growth in consumers. You could learn very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, to that point, you guys started with humans, and then usually use a different metaphor. Like I have a friend who's an executive at a casino, and they have people that talk to whales, to your point. But for everybody else, there's no support, and they actually know that people sometimes do have questions and do want help and do but I think it's a situation where they can't do it with humans, and so they've started turning to AI to give everybody the same sort of high end experience that you would give a whale. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
in financial services, to your point, one thing that's interesting that we've seen across the board is, particularly in the sort of newer people, they have a lot of questions and they're ashamed to ask. But when it's an AI, like, they're happy to engage with the AI and have a long conversation and ask these questions. Similar in healthcare, actually, also, where people feel like they're stupid if they don't know the answer, but that's not right. They're not stupid. They just haven't had the opportunity to go ask these things. So, I guess as you've started using AI agents, like, what are the typical things customers are doing with the AI agent? Like, how has it impacted the onboarding process?
Yeah, and I'm not going to subscribe to the casino or whales analogy, but we are, one of our focus at Wealthsimple, or you see platforms like Robinhood, is the democratization of finance and trying
Yeah.
to use technology to bring the product and level of service and support that a high net worth customer who gets it through private banking, and try to make that available to everyone, literally, even if you just get started. And AI is one way we do this. And really interesting emerging behavior is that when clients understand that they're talking to an AI, they are actually now adapting their speech and trying to make it easier for the AI to understand or to answer. And I think that's because they've now been able to use maybe ChatGPT voice or Gemini or whatever else. And they understand like some of the limitations that the AI has, like, sometimes on the interruptions, it can be a little tricky, or you have to articulate as well as you can to make sure they understand the keywords, etc. And so it's funny to see people change their behavior when they understand it's an AI. What we're seeing is what you said. People are, they're not worried to waste the AI's time is what I'm learning. And if they don't understand, it's like, can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? Can you explain that again? And we're trying to like not make it last too long because we want to be mindful of people's time. And so we say, try to not be too long in the prompts, and try to say thanks, and just like terminate the conversation whenever, but what we're seeing is like people are like, wait, I have another question. Don't hang up, almost.
Yeah.
We're adapting to that. And yeah, they ask a ton of questions. We see like a group of people who have 30-45 minutes conversations, and they want to know everything about Wealthsimple. They want to know everything about our products. So that's really, really interesting, but still kind of monitoring also the reaction and what is going to be the impact on our brand. But I feel like just the same way it felt weird to buy a $1,000 flight on the phone for the first few times, it will, most people will feel more and more comfortable, I think, talking to an AI, and might even prefer talking to an AI where there is no background noise. You understand very clearly what the AI is saying. It has infinite patience, and you can call it back anytime of the day, night, and it's there. And we see another behavior we did not expect is a lot of callbacks from our customers to the number they save. We now specifically tell our AI agent to we even say to prompt it like, hey, just save this number if you need it.
Yeah, I love that behavior, by the way. It's like you used to do it when you found like a good plumber. Like, oh, I found a
Yeah.
good plumber. I'm going to save his number in my phone. And now people are starting to do that with AI agents, to your point, because they're getting a level of service which is elevated, and it's seen as a premium thing, and they want to store it. To your point, I think one
And
of
I
the
think,
hard. No, go ahead.
yeah, the other thing I wanted to say, I think, like, for us, it's also a matter of preference. And I think what we're also learning is like, because the behavior is still like a little bit two camps type of audience, like there's no reason to force people into one camp. And I think like one of the learning is like to offer the AI service, but also to allow clients to talk to a human if they want to. And I think that's where like on the technical side, the biggest challenge is going to be the handoff, right? And like, how do you staff enough people so they're ready to, and they have the context that the AI can pass to the human, but not it's like, hey, this is an AI agent you're talking to, you prefer talking to a human, say it at any point in the conversation. And so everyone has like the service that they want. And
Yeah.
my guess is that you do that for now for a few more quarters, a couple of years max, and eventually you see that 90% of the time clients and people will rather speak to the AI.
Yeah, and I think to your point, there's two sort of intersecting things happening. On one side, the AI is getting better faster and faster. I think within 18 months, I think it'll be indistinguishable from a human. You won't know. Like, literally, you will not know. We're not there today, but we're not far. And on the other side, I think if you go and survey somebody, and we've done this, and you say, hey, do you want to talk to an automated agent? They say, no, God forbid. Like, because their impression of an automated agent is either an IVR, where it's, press one, press two, press three, or what they call an IVA, which is, hey, tell me what you'd like. And you say something and it goes, oh, so you mean this? You're like, no, 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 press zero, give me a human. So I think there's been such a history of terrible automation in voice that people are very biased against the idea. Sometimes we have customers where for years they've had such a bad IVR that when we trade it out for an AI agent, the first thing people do when they call, literally before anything happens, the AI doesn't even talk. The customer says, human, zero, just because they've been trained to stay away from that IVR. Yeah. So I do think like some brands have inadvertently polluted their customer experience by using subpar automation. And here's an opportunity, to your point, to level up materially, but you do need to make clear to customers. You need to say, this is something different. Here,
can I ask you a couple questions as well? Is there like a challenge with phones and phone lines where the experience and the quality of the sound and the latency when you talk to your phone, right, like to an app directly, is better than through phone lines, where sound compression and other like technical limitations make it like probably a little more challenging to get like the exact human experience that you'd expect?
Yeah, so a couple of things to think about. So one is phone service. Like, let's say you're talking to a human agent in the Philippines. Like, there's latency that's added in that. So that's one. Two is currently on cell phone networks in the United States, it's not HD voice, it's just regular voice. And so it knocks out a lot of the intonation in voice, whether it's AI or a human. So if you think about those two things on latency, to give you an exact number, humans face to face, let's say talk in the 400 millisecond latency between your end of an utterance and my starting, when we're not interrupting ourselves. A contact center agent, a human, let's say on the phone, is closer to 750 milliseconds, partly because they don't know exactly the answer and they're looking stuff up, and partly because of the telephony. AI agents, I think right now are in that 750 millisecond to 1 second range. So about what a contact center is, but it doesn't yet quite feel like the face-to-face conversation. So I think two things are going to change. One is HD voice is coming out on all the cell networks in the next 6 months. That'll give so much more fidelity. We actually have very good AI voices, but to your point, the sound is knocked out when we compress them. And then the second thing that's happening is more and more people are using basically VoIP calling, not normal like cell phone calling. And so that actually can allow us to make sure that we co-locate the AI agent as close as possible to the customer, and there's as little latency as possible, and it never even goes through the phone network. So for instance, we can now do, so it just came out recently, we can now do calls on Apple FaceTime. So that's kind of cool. So like you can do a FaceTime call, or you can do a WebRTC call straight from the website. So those things like will continue to help for sure.
Yeah, no, that's exciting to see. Like, it's the same thing I was thinking around, like technology can compound on like different levels, where the AI is going to get better, the latency, but it's exciting to hear that even the phone lines are getting still like upgrades.
Oh yeah, it's crazy that HD voice, the technology came out a while ago. It's just it's expensive for these carriers to go and upgrade everything, and so it's taken a little bit of time. But the sound quality difference when you test it is shocking. Like, it is so much better.
Awesome, interesting.
So, as you think now about, what's next perhaps for Wealthsimple, like, I don't know, I'm not asking you to make forward-looking statements for the company, but what are the big challenges now for the company? Like, what are you thinking about?
I think the challenges are the same, but at like maybe a different scale. So we are trying to grow faster. Our goal is to become the largest financial institution in Canada and beyond eventually. And so we are going to add a lot of product functionality. We're still not necessarily at par with the banks who have been around for 200 years in Canada. And so we still have a lot of product development to do. What I'm interested in, and without revealing too much of our future strategy, is to show up more in real life. And I think eventually all the fintechs and the apps, the website, the online aspects of fintechs could reach some sort of ceiling where some clients are still not comfortable, moving over their life savings to one of these fintechs or apps. And I think like showing up in real life through different things through spaces, through activations, through sponsorships to try to break that ceiling and make people feel more comfortable that we're here to stay is going to be an interesting challenge for us, I think, over the coming years. So that's one thing, and keep growing our penetration in Canada.
Makes sense. And how important do you think, AI is going to be, let's say, to the, you obviously, like every company, you have a website, you have an
Mhm.
app, you have social media, and you're starting to learn about AI agents. Like, fast forward 3 years, 5 years, how important do you think AI agents will be to that interaction with the customer?
Super important. So I think like it's hard to guess where it's going, but I think because it's changing so fast, right? And it's hard to guess like what habits customers are going to form over time, and how comfortable they are with something today doesn't mean, is not necessarily a great indicator with what they're going to be comfortable with in the future. And so I think what is really important is to stay up to date, be really on the edge, and test a lot of things so that when you start seeing those habits form and when you start seeing the trend a little more clearly, you're ready to go and like ready to beat your competitors and like be the number one on these. So one thing I have in mind, right? Like that's just like my personal point of view, not something necessarily we're actively discussing or I've heard anyone discuss, but I love the concept of ChatGPT apps. And I think there is a debate potentially in the future around AI where do you bring, let's say, let's take the example of Hopper. Do you bring the AI into the Hopper app where you open Hopper and you say, hey, go and book me a hotel in 3 stars in Vegas for next week. And then, it goes and do that. Or do you go in ChatGPT and to just use that interface and just like do everything from there as your base
Mm,
app, right? And for flights, like travel is always the example, but it's a terrible example because I want to see the rooms, I want to like see the flights,
mm,
etc. So you need like visual confirmation. But now you're thinking about a fintech app, you know, personally, let's say it again, personally, I'd rather maybe go to ChatGPT and say, hey, Chad, can you just like my paycheck just came in. I got a notification. Can you go and pay my credit card? Send $1,000 to my sister because I need to reimburse
mm,
her, and take whatever is left and put it into the SPY index from my non-registered account.
mm,
And I could go and do that in the Wealthsimple app, and it was going to take me 20 clicks. Or I can go and ask the agent and probably ChatGPT that I trust or anything else to do it. And I think, when I talk about this with other people, they're like, well, I'm never going to trust ChatGPT with like, go and buy some stock for me. And that just makes me feel like, what I was hearing, which was like, I will never buy, a $2,000 flight on a phone. And
yeah,
no, you will. And you will
yeah,
trust ChatGPT. And I think like, for the first 10 times, it's going to give you a prompt, confirm, confirm, confirm. And some actions like, I think like we're going to need to change the legislation around finance because a lot of the actions require a human confirmation or require a human in the loop by law, but it's going to slow down the innovation massively. But I feel like after a few times, I'm going to be tired of confirming, and when I see it 10 times in a row it works, that's just how I want to interact and manage my finances. And then
yeah.
still, I keep the app probably if I want to go and browse and see, but for actions that's and then from our side we'll need to build, I guess, the correct connections
Yeah.
for the agents to be able to take action into our app.
Yeah. So I think, somebody sent me a video of a Star Trek episode from a long time ago where one of the Star Trek people from the future comes into like the present and goes to Earth, and they sit him in front of a computer and he's like looking at the keyboard and the mouse and whatever. And he picks up the mouse and he says, "Hello, computer. Can you do X, Y, and Z for me?"
Yeah.
For a long time, we've assumed that the interface of the future would be voice. And
Hmm.
obviously, we talk to each other all the time. That is the main
Yeah.
way we communicate. But then, with a computer, it just the capability wasn't there at the beginning. And so we had a keyboard, we had a mouse, we had other ways of interacting. So to your point, I think voice is going to be a really powerful part of this. Like once you can just like pick up your phone and say, hey, do these three things for me, or what's your opinion on this thing, or whatever else, like it's
Hmm.
going to be super powerful. Technically speaking, I actually think that there's going to be a lot of specialization in the same way, like you go to your iPhone to open an app, but it's still an app that was built by the company. I still think the company is going to have a huge part to play in how you can interact with the company and what the
Oh yeah.
agent does. I don't think that we're going to be anytime soon in a situation where you trust a generalizable agent like a ChatGPT to go take that action, because
Hmm.
it's like saying I take somebody off the street. I think of ChatGPT as like taking somebody off the street. So it's like saying,
Hmm.
take you off the street, go make this trade for me. I would never do that. But if I say
Yeah.
you're a stockbroker and you're trained, go make this trade for me, for sure I would do it.
Hmm.
So I
I
think
think.
that's just the important distinction is there will be apps built by the companies that are the trained version that can take
Hmm.
all those actions for you.
Totally, and especially because I think right now it's interesting because the most avid consumer of AI are probably developers, right? With Cursor and other tools, and developers, what they're really good at is asking for context, or being very specific about their ask, because they can't call a variable something and then another one the same thing. Like they think a little bit in like logic and math, and need to be very specific. But when you're going to ask someone who's not in software development, you can't just say go and buy me this stock, because you have to say what account, how much, what type of
Mm.
order. So if you're a little savvy, you're going to say go and buy me this stock in my non-registered account with a limit order that's like 2% above the
Mm.
current price or whatever. It's still too complicated, right? So most people are going to say go buy me this stock, and then you'll need the agent to refine the query and the app to like give enough context to the AI, so the AI can ask like the questions that it needs to ask to know what to do. I think it's going to create like a big gap between the apps that are able to build those connections as quickly as possible versus legacy, potentially like old banks. Imagine how long that's going to potentially take. Maybe some of them will surprise us, and maybe some smaller companies are going to move super fast into that space. But I will simple, like we want to make sure no one is going to do to us what we've been able to do to the bank so far. And so
Yeah.
we're definitely at the forefront of that trend.
To your point, I think that is the critical piece is if you have an AI agent that just doesn't connect to anything, it's just answering FAQ, it's not that helpful. Like the two systems that we really deeply integrate into, one is company CRM, whatever form that may take, so we can
Hmm.
personalize the conversation. And the other piece is their what we call actions. So like the APIs they have to dispute or to add a trade or to sell something or whatever it may be. And I think the companies that are accelerating their ability to externalize that either through MCP or through APIs are going to be much more successful because the AI agents can take those actions. If you're not accelerating that work, it's going to be really hard. What's
Hmm.
interesting is, it's not been uniform to your point that it's been the newest companies that are accelerating that. We have some very large clients that have been very forward thinking in this and
Interesting.
have really understood that that's going to be their differentiation going forward, and I think are way ahead. So I think it's just a question of like what is your organization's commitment to externalizing these APIs for AI agents?
Yeah, totally. And I think it starts by creating a culture that is going to reward your people to use AI, to get interested in AI. And so we have our little AI days in my team where people just go
Yeah.
off and make some games. Or I'm obsessed with Replit right now. I don't know if you saw, they dropped
Mhm.
Replit design yesterday. You can make a lot of like small tools. So everyone in my team now feels like a small developer,
Yeah.
and with tools like like yours, like Regal, like Braze, that gives us the freedom to do a bit of development inside of them. AI has been an amazing enabler to create like super cool journeys, or you know things that where our end user can actually interact within the app, like little timers, or you can flip the coin in the app right now for a giveaway, and then it gives you a pop-up that says you got like 100 entries in the giveaway, little Easter eggs. Nothing like
Yeah.
core functionality necessarily, right? But yeah,
No, it's
creating that
coming. I
culture.
think one of the things I think about a lot is what is the purpose of enterprise software? So historically, to use Braze and Regal as good examples. A human being came in, went, "Doot, doot, doot," and told it to do things, and it did things. And you had to hire very smart human beings who are very knowledgeable about those systems and about marketing or contact center to be
Hmm.
able to do it. We're getting, in engineering a new flavor, right? Which is AI is telling you what the code should be, and you're supervising the AI and suggesting things and sort of like using that AI to get your job done. And so that's where we're starting to go on our side. And I think Braze will likely go there as
Hmm.
well, which is when you log in, instead of you doing the work, you're instructing an agent, and you have maybe multiple AI sort of internal agents that are helping you build out the external agents and helping you A/B
Mm-hmm.
test and improve things. And so your job becomes supervising the agents, validating that they're doing is correct, instead of actually doing the work yourself. And so I think what you're doing is fantastic, that you're forcing or giving your team the opportunity to actually go and
Mm-hmm.
play with these tools, because there's so many new paradigms in this that have never existed before, and it's an opportunity to go do it. And it's going to be like the people who don't do it. It's going to be like, I remember when somebody came in and said they didn't know how to Google. I go, well, you can't do this job if you don't know how to Google. So if
Yeah.
you don't know how to use the new version of enterprise software, which is AI building AI, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to be able to do the job.
Yeah. I think, it's, but instead of like closing the gap, which it could do between people, I'm worried sometimes that it can increase the gap, because you see the people are super curious and passionate who love to learn new things. They become like Superman, right? Like they have superpowers with AI,
Yeah.
and the people who don't initially are not initially curious about technology, and it's fine. Like you come in, you can do an amazing work, and not be obsessed with AI in your after work. But that can create like and widen the gap. And I've seen like intern in my team, like moving at speed of light, and like surpassing people's capabilities who have been like with us for a few years, right? Like, so that's really interesting and scary also in some ways. And then what the challenge for me now, like in this paradigm where you can do anything, the challenge becomes like, well, what do you do next? And
Hmm.
like, how do you prioritize, and how do you curate actually what you want to do? Because yeah, we can launch a campaign every other day now, or like every other week maybe, because it's so fast to build and launch something. But the bottleneck becomes your client's attention at some point, right? Like you can't just like launch a million things all the time. And your added value becomes like potentially your taste, right? Like, which is bit of the buzzword in AI. And then trying to say, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is good. This is bad. And here's the order in which we're going to do things.
Yeah.
Matters
I
more
think
than
that's
like
a
how we're going to execute them.
Yeah, I think that's a good place for us to stop today. So to your point, there's a lot of opportunity. So, if anybody wants to become a new Wealthsimple customer, go to wealthsimple.com and you'll get an opportunity to onboard, perhaps with an AI agent as well from Regal. Simon, thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And thanks for being an amazing partner through us figuring out how to leverage this new technology.
Of course.